right, delighted to be back again with Louise Wannier, as I would pronounce it, from Montreal.
Thank you.
Welcome back. And one of my favorite questions is asking about influencers, because influencers come in all sizes, shapes, colors, you name it. Sometimes they're in a minute influencing you in time that seem to hit at the right time, or sometimes they're for a lifetime. Can you share 2 or 3 people that have influenced your life?
Sure. 2 or 3 people. Oh my goodness. Well, probably start with my grandfather. He was and my father. My father was a man who understood the world, I would say. He was a great scientist, mathematician, and he always talked about there being content people and process people, and that the lucky people sometimes had both. And I think he was one that had both. But yeah, he taught me to care about doing things right, about doing things properly. He told a story, or someone told a story after he passed away, about when he finished a paper, a scientific research paper, he would put it in a drawer for a month. He'd pull it out in a month and see whether he still believed what he'd written, or
Nice.
whether he could still improve it. So he'd let things settle. He'd also tell me not to study all the way through the night, but to get an early night's sleep, finish studying, and something would happen during the night that things would settle. And I still do that. I found that to be very helpful.
Brilliant.
One of the earlier significant influencers for about 10 years on my entrepreneurial life until he passed away was a man called Ren Zafiropoulos. He wrote this little book called Entrepreneurial Zen, Philosophical Thoughts for an Uncluttered Life. Ren Zafiropoulos. He was a larger-than-life man. I met him through tech. I was in Vistage, it's now called Vistage Tech, for many years, building my software company. And Ren was one of the presenters at one of the group's meetings. And after it, he mentioned that he mentored some people. So I called him up and I said, "How about me? Would you take me on?" So he said, "Come on up to Utah." Utah in the middle of the desert. He had built himself a castle. He was one of the first entrepreneurs in the very early days of venture capital in Silicon Valley. He knew Arthur Rock, who was actually the man who funded him. He worked at he developed electrostatic printing. He was a physicist, and then he sold his company at about $10 million to Xerox and built it up to be a $100 million division of Xerox Corporation, and then went on to be the vice president in charge of a lot of different aspects, and knew Steve Jobs and a lot of other significant people in technology. But he mostly just taught me things such as the coexistence of opposites at any particular moment. I mean, this is Zen teaching, but I learned or got introduced to Zen teaching through him, and he applied it to business. And this book is still available if anybody wants a copy. It's privately published since his passing by his wife,
Oh, very cool.
Zafiropoulos. Let's see, and then you asked about a third, and another very special gentleman who was actually in between Ren and my underpinnings, my grandfather, my father, Ron Robison. Ron, also of blessed memory, he was a partner at Ernst, where I was a consultant, my first job out of business school.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned from him negotiation. I learned from him how to look at a company and analyze it, and how to see. And he told me great stories of when he needed to get to somebody. And those days, not everybody was available because everybody was very busy. And he had to meet somebody. He just went into their building, their office, and just sat there, became friendly with the secretary, and just sat there until he had an opportunity to speak to the person he needed to speak to. Like, he just very focused, laser focused. I learned a lot from him. Very strategic.
Hey, if you want to be a brain surgeon, go hang out with the top brain surgeon, right?
Right.
If you can.
I really have met so many people that have given me little pieces. But those are 4 people I'd like to honor right now.
Yeah, that's spectacular. And it kind of relates back to what you said in the previous conversation about with knowing it or not knowing it, you're always influencing people in one way or another yourself.
Yes, that's true. It's a
So
little scary to realize that.
it can be scary. It can be
It
scary.
means you have to take a bit more responsibility for how you are every moment.
Yeah, you got to be careful what you're influencing.
Right,
But
right.
you've been an
Can I
influence.
say I've also learned from my children?
Absolutely.
I have four amazing children who are now young adults figuring out their lives.
Absolutely. No, that's right on the money. And not as many people say that as they should, but I coached a lot of kids in sports and learned a ton from coaching kids in sports. And in that sense, teachers are one of our most valuable assets, and they get the wealth of all the kids they taught over the years and bring that. And that's another important area, but this could go on forever. So
But I want to add one more thing, and that is that well, I've recently been doing some work on therapeutic tremors, which is a way of re-regulating the body after trauma. I've been through cancer a few times, and one of the I'm fortunate to be here, but I wanted to say that there's recent work, a lot of study on what's called trauma-induced growth, and how you choose or how you work with yourself to respond to trauma. You have an opportunity for a type of growth that is it's a, you don't want to have the opportunity, but given the opportunity, you have an opportunity to actually, and I think that that's what COVID is doing, coming back to COVID. It's a trauma inflicted on our world that is now an opportunity for us to grow significantly.
no, I really appreciate you sharing that because number one, there's a lot of trauma out there right now, and
Mm,
and how we handle it is going to make a big difference in the future.
right.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.